Welcome to the Built for More podcast. This is for the woman who wants to get the most out of herself in fitness, business, and in life. So if you want to learn the skills, the strategy, and the mindset to get the most out of your body, your mind, and your business, you're in the right place. If you've ever felt like you can't stick to your plan, you just don't have enough discipline or willpower, well, this episode is for you. A lot of people will blame themselves when it's actually not a discipline issue. It's the fact that the plan is just not working for you. And that's what we're going to unpack in this episode today. First of all, guys, I've got Lily back with me today on the podcast. Welcome back, Lil.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you here again. And what I wanted to do with these episodes, because obviously, Lil's going to be here co-hosting a lot of these episodes with me. I thought I'd do a little bit of a life catch-up first because I really want this to be an opportunity too for people to get to know us on a more personal level beyond what you can on socials. I always think I might be doing things in my personal life or busy at work, and I'm just not posting on social media what I'm doing. So there's so many things like going on that you guys probably don't even know about. So I want this to be a space where we get to do that. So what's been happening in your life the last couple of weeks, Lil?
Well, I feel like it has been a bit of a calm before the storm type situation, just trying to enjoy some quiet weekends because of obviously season 8 is coming up soon, which I'm so excited for. I always enjoy a bit of a break, but then once comp season has started, I'm just so hyped already for all of the girls we have in season A. I just had my first wedding anniversary on the weekend. So I had a bit of a date with the husband, which was nice. And I feel like we've had a few community events lately, which has been really fun. We had our BFit community catch up at Powerhouse the other weekend, doing the gym workout, which was really good. Got a lot of great feedback from the girls, which was fun. And then we have our posing workshop this weekend, which would be really good as well. Get some of the girls together. But yeah, other than that, just kind of working on comp prep and getting really excited for all the shows we have coming up, and really excited for Thailand as well that I have coming in June for Sienna, which will be really fun.
Yeah, that's coming up so fast, actually.
I know, it is. But yeah, that'll be a really good experience, and I'm excited to see how that all goes. What about yourself?
Awesome. Yeah, I feel honestly the same way in the sense that it really is the calm before the storm. And I feel as though the shows are starting later this year. Are they? I don't know. It feels like it because my first client in season A isn't competing till May. So I feel like I've had such a massive runway at the start of this year.
Yeah. I thought previously it was like mid-April. But yeah, my first show is 26th of April. So it's not far off now though.
Yeah. So I've really just kind of been using this time where we do have those quieter weekends outside of the comp season to focus on other projects, I guess, like this podcast being one of them. As Lil said, we've had some really great community events lately, which has been really fun. We always like bringing the girls together in person, and I'm looking forward to our posing workshop this weekend because that's also an opportunity for us to check in person with the girls that are competing this year. So looking forward to that. I have also been really working a lot on my Fitness Business Accelerator program. So in the business mentoring side of things, I relaunched that at the start of this year. Basically, I built it into a different format. So I was running it last year, but I built it into a different format where people can kind of jump in at any time, whereas last year it was like you had to start on the date that I was running it. And I found that a bit limiting. So I relaunched it, and it has gone so much better than I could even imagine. Like all the girls are so engaged and they're just getting things done, and they're really lifting each other up and like coming to the live calls. And it's so great to watch because I feel like with those things, a lot of the time, it's easy for people to not do that and to not engage in the community. But yeah, I'm just so happy with how that's going. So I've been putting a lot of my time into that, which has been great. Outside of that, yeah, I just have really been sleeping, one of my favorite hobbies, and just, trying to make sure that I'm refreshed and recharged heading into the comp season. I think it's one of those things you can get away with working every weekend and doing the big shows, big days at the shows, as long as you are spending the time where you don't have the shows actually recharging. So that's a big focus.
I agree, because by the last show, you're pretty spent from a lot of early flights and different state every single weekend, but
or multiple in one weekend.
Yeah, or multiple in one weekend. Yeah, I've got a few of those.
Yeah. I did also want to say too, I did see the new Colleen Hoover movie, The Reminders of Him, on the weekend.
I haven't seen that yet, but I heard I've had like reviews.
Yeah, so if you follow me on Instagram, you know I love reading books, and I went through a massive Colleen Hoover phase. I actually really liked this one. I wasn't a big fan of the It Ends With Us movie, but this one I thought was really well done, so highly recommend.
I'm so glad because that's actually my favourite book of hers. I thought It Ends With Us was a bit overhyped, and Reminders of Him has always been my favourite book of hers. So I'm really excited to watch that one. And Verity, which is coming out obviously later in the year. I think that's October.
When is that? October.
I thought it was May, but it looks like it's been pushed back to October. So
I feel like we need to do like a BFit community Verity. Yeah. If you girls want that, BFit clients listening to this, let us know. Because I think that would be so fun, and I know so many of you read Colleen Hoover as well. All right. Well, let's get into the episode then. So basically what we want to unpack for you guys today is the reasons why maybe it's actually your plan not working for you, as opposed to it being the fact that you don't have any discipline or any willpower. I think a lot of the time people feel like they're failing because they can't stick to the plan. And sometimes it's because the plan is actually completely unrealistic and unachievable for you, or too restrictive. So I want to go through a bunch of different factors that might make this the case, essentially. And number one is being too restrictive and cutting out all of the foods you love. Lil, do you want to chat through how this has an impact on someone's ability to stick to the plan?
Yeah, definitely. So there's been multiple studies on this that have shown, we are most likely to binge or, go back to the foods that we restrict. It kind of creates this power that they have over us. Whereas if they're included in our everyday diet, they just become like any other food. So the diets that are most likely to fail are the ones where you try and fully cut out, all carbohydrates or all of your favorite foods. And, if it's going to feel like a punishment, of course, you're not going to want to stick to it. If you're absolutely hating the diet that you're on, you're setting yourself up for failure. It's only ever going to be short term.
Yeah, 100%. I used to do this for sure when I first started in my teens trying to lose weight and be skinny. I just cut out everything. I pretty much just ate, I was vegetarian at the time, so tofu, vegetables, fruit. I was so restrictive, and I was such a sweet tooth as well. Like, I was a chocolate lover, and I would just restrict it. So then when I finally did have a taste of it, I would just want more, or I would just go into that headspace, oh, well, I've had this, so now the whole day is ruined, and I would just eat whatever I would want for the day and then feel guilty about it. And I think a big shift for me happened when I went through what was going to be my first competition prep, actually, and it was exactly like that. It was way too restrictive. All I was allowed to eat was chicken, vegetables, and coconut oil. Coconut oil was like such a hype back then. I know, so random. But it was like I had to have chicken, vegetables, and then I can't remember how much coconut oil, maybe like a teaspoon with every meal.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yep. And extra meals in between, meal 1 to 5, So, yeah, I don't eat coconut oil to this day.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. Everything that just tasted like coconut. But I wasn't allowed to have any carbs. I could only have that. And it was during that experience that I did feel so restricted and so deprived. And my body didn't even respond well to it. It got to the point where I just wasn't really responding. And that was when I first did a reverse diet. And I actually guided that myself from things that I had learned. And I started then incorporating different foods. So I would start incorporating more carbs and more chocolate. And that was when I started getting the best results with my body, because I felt like there was nothing off limits and I could stick to it so easily because I wasn't trying to demonize foods anymore or cut out the foods that I really liked. And then all of a sudden I actually started responding better.
Yeah, I completely lost my train of thought. I was going to say something there. Oh yeah, I think when you understand as well what actually drives fat loss in particular, and then it's more about your calorie balance. Like, yes, food choice is important. You don't want to just only do an if it fits your macros and then just have like fast food the whole time, because that's going to come up with its own issues of deficiencies and, feeling sluggish and gut health and all those things. But when you actually understand that it's about calorie balance and being in a deficit, you realize that there's not one food or one food group that is preventing you from, making progress.
Yeah, 100% agree. And yeah, nutrient quality does matter, and it can help facilitate fat loss, getting enough protein and fiber and things like that. But you can absolutely still incorporate some of the other less nutritional foods as well. And it's probably going to increase your adherence to the point that you actually lose more body fat than if you try and avoid those foods completely.
Yeah, and we always say to our clients to aim for that 80-20 approach of, 80% whole foods, your lean meats, your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, and then your 20% of your, quote unquote soul foods that make you feel good. And I always have the saying that if putting, a sauce or something that's unhealthy on a whole food allows you to eat it and increase your intake of lean meats and vegetables and grains and things like that, then that is a healthy choice for you.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think that's why I have myself, in many years of coaching, I've really shifted into a more flexible dieting approach. And when I first started out 10, 12 years ago now, I was probably a little bit more on, okay, you've got to cut out all of those foods. You've got to follow a meal plan because that's what I knew. That's what I had done. And it wasn't until I kind of went through my own experience with flexible dieting that I was like, oh, actually, it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah. And I think that is the benefit of tracking. A lot of people see tracking as, too tedious or too restrictive. And it's not something that you need to do until you're in a retirement home. You don't have to track for the rest of your life, but even having one period of your life of tracking, even if it's a month, it's going to educate you so much more in terms of, what a protein is, what fats are, what carbs are, rough, calorie density of foods, what portion sizes should look like, depending if your goal is muscle gain, fat loss, performance, whatever it may be. It does teach you a lot compared to just taking a stab in the dark and guessing.
Yeah, and it can also take away a lot of that fear around foods because when you start tracking and incorporating the daily piece of chocolate or whatnot, then you start to realize, oh, actually, I can make progress even while eating my favorite chocolate every day. I remember years ago now, I think, Sohee Lee, she is a pretty big fitness influencer, or she was a few years ago. I haven't really seen that much of her recently, but she did a comp prep where she ate a Snickers bar every single day.
Yes,
just to prove
I remember
the point.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is actually possible. You can even get to that level of conditioning while incorporating a food like that. And if it's going to make it more sustainable, then it's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. I think another massive component is doing a deficit that's much too large, trying to go from, say, your baseline is, 2,500 calories and that's where you maintain, and then going straight to 1,500. You do not need to do such a significant drop from the get-go.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of women associate, okay, I want to diet, I want to lose fat, I'm going to start eating 1,200 calories just straight off the bat.
Magic number 1,200.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why that's the magic number, but it seems to be. I feel like in a lot of conversations I have with women looking to get support, they might say, I've been eating 1,200 calories for all this time. Yeah, and I'm just not losing weight. And it's well, you probably are restricting yourself so much, and then I don't want to use the term blowout, but, over-consuming, I suppose, on the weekend or every few days when you're like, nah, this is too hard, I throw in the towel, and then you just end up overeating. So if we actually looked at that as calories averaged across the week, let's say you're trying to stick to 1,200 during the week, but then you're so deprived that on the weekend you actually eat 3,500 both days of the weekend, well, all of a sudden you're at maintenance or even in a surplus. You're not in a deficit anymore.
Yeah, and I think something that is more important to myself as well is it does increase your chance of losing lean mass, so losing your muscle and your bone mineral density and things like that. And then if you weren't to maintain it and then you're to potentially binge or go yo-yo back to where you were, you're going to be in a worse off position because now you're potentially at a higher body fat percentage and a lower muscle mass, which is what does, protect us the most is muscle mass.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're in that extremely aggressive calorie deficit, the hunger is just next level. Like you're really fighting your physiology to try and stick to the plan. Whereas if you go in a more mild to moderate deficit where that's not so extreme, well, you're probably going to improve your chances of actually sticking to it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why, periodized phases is like it works so much more. It's more sustainable in the long term if you have, okay, I'm going to be doing a fat loss phase for 8 weeks or 10 weeks, whatever it may be, depending on the person, having it as a structured block. And then maybe in that time you might run a refeed or a diet break or maybe a reverse diet and have a bit of a break. And if you want to have a second fat loss phase down the track, you can plan that in rather than chronically, sometimes years we get clients that have been trying to yo-yo diet for so long that their metabolism is just, it's such a poor spot. Their relationship with food is in an even worse spot because, they go through this phase of, going to 500 calories, 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories, and then, 2,500, 3,000 calories and binging and then just rinsing and repeating.
Yeah, and it's really about breaking that cycle by, using a more phasic approach or a less aggressive deficit approach for sure. And I think if you do need to take your calories to a low and unsustainable, more aggressive level, then that's where the importance of refeeds and diet breaks becomes even more imperative. Like we use that in the competition prep space, for example, right? Where, sometimes it is pretty aggressive. It's pretty extreme and unsustainable. So in order to balance out some of those physiological responses, we use diet breaks and refeeds. Now, that's actually still applicable to lifestyle clients, and I think it's often not used with lifestyle clients. Even other coaches, for example, might not integrate those diet breaks. Like I hear of people that have been on 1,200 calories for years on end with no diet breaks or refeeds. Like at least if you're going to need to take it to that level, there needs to be some sort of reprieve to be able to manage that physiological response and then improve your ability to stick to it and get the result.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of clients like that have been, chronically yo-yo dieting or on low calories and they're struggling to see those results, often when they come to us, we don't actually put them in a deficit first. We reverse diet them first and we go through a maintenance phase. And a lot of the time that's challenging. It goes against the grain and what they're used to. But then they see the reason why once we eventually enter that deficit, that they see better results that they previously didn't see maybe when they're on lower calories because they've actually given their body the break that it needed to respond well.
Yeah, 100%. And often they start losing weight when they start reverse dieting because their body is so deprived that it's like, oh, I'm safe now. I'm being fed now. And that's when it's like, I'm going to let go of some body fat. So it can be used for that too.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next one is the all or nothing mindset. So the pressure to be 100% perfect at all times, not having meals off plan, not ever skipping a workout, and how that really impacts your mindset to the point that often you just end up giving up entirely. Do you want to unpack that, Lil?
Yeah, I feel like the all or nothing approach is probably one of the biggest roadblocks to making meaningful progress because results come from what you do consistently. And I would much rather someone is 80%, even 70% consistent year round compared to 100% for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You're not going to see results if you're constantly throwing in the towel and trying to strive for that level of perfection.
Yeah, 100%. I'm thinking about a client that I started working with recently, and she has struggled with binge eating before in the past. And when we first started, I did put her on a decent level of calories. I think it was 2,200, around about that. And the goal was to recompose because I knew a deficit wouldn't be ideal for her. And I remember in the first week or two, and she'll probably know who she is if she's listening to this, but she was like so wanting to be 100% on the plan. And I was like, I need you to go out for dinner and enjoy meals out and have balance and, work some chocolate into your day. It doesn't have to all be meat and vegetables and whole foods. I want you to work these things in because I know that if you don't, that we're going to end up where you started and exactly what you're wanting to move away from. Yeah. And that did happen. Because she went too hard, too fast. And I see that a lot. And I think it's so important that, if we have that mindset, if we can't have one meal off plan, otherwise it just becomes a spiral and we eat the whole day off plan or the whole weekend off plan. Well, that's exactly what happened in that situation, right? As soon as she then went to have a meal out, she was just like, I've ruined everything. And then she ate meals out for like 3 consecutive days. And it's actually not the meal out that's the problem or that impacts your result. It's when it does become that all or nothing and you head into that spiral.
Yeah, and I think it's why a lot of, New Year's resolutions, for example, don't work, because a lot of people put so much pressure on, I have to get everything perfect from January 1st, or, I'm going to start on Monday, and if it's not perfect on Monday, then I'm throwing in the towel. But if you think about like how many days across the year you're actually wasting, so to speak, if you're constantly giving up on a Wednesday and you're waiting again till Monday, there's so much progress that could be made in those days. And it's why, for example, I hate 75 hard. Any of my clients that do 75 hard, they will know about it. I always give my opinion about it because I hate the mentality that as soon as you miss one day, you have to start again and you've ruined everything. And I don't like that mentality because that isn't the case. You don't just suddenly miss one gym session and then all the muscle that you've built just melts off your body. It's not the case.
Yeah, it's so much more important to just focus on being consistent and to reset if you do have one of those days. And we all have them. I think, it's human to have a day where maybe you do eat something or go over your calories or something happens and you don't end up getting to the gym, but it's not the end of the world. How can you reset? How can you get that gym session done elsewhere? Or even if you can't, actually training one less time that week is not going to impact your long-term progress. It doesn't have to be everything or nothing, and that's the mindset we need to break.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time if I have clients come to me with this, maybe they've gone into a bit of a spiral, they've had 1 week, maybe 2 weeks where they've fallen off plan and they're just feeling overwhelmed and lost, we'll just focus on what's one thing you can do tomorrow. Okay, so maybe your steps have gone out the window and you've been, sitting around at home. Let's focus just on your steps tomorrow. I don't care if you don't make it to the gym. Let's just start there and let's build the habits again from there. Okay, the next day, let's try and get to the gym again. Maybe on the weekend, let's try and meal prep. And eventually those habits are going to compound to, again, make a big difference in the long run. And it's about building momentum. And if you're constantly stopping and starting, you're going to lose that momentum.
Yeah, 100%. The next one is time management. And having a plan that essentially doesn't fit in with the amount of time that you have to dedicate to it. Now, a great example of this would be if you're a busy mom. We work with a lot of moms. So if you're a busy mom, you also have a job, you don't have time to go and do 2 sessions a day. And it's always crazy to me when I see people trying to do a plan like that, because of course that's setting them up for failure. Of course they're not going to have the time to do those sessions when they're trying to run an entire household while still working. I think it's really important that when it comes to the plan, it needs to fit in with your life. And the reality is we actually need a lot less than what we think we need to make great progress. Like you can see changes with 3 sessions a week and hitting your steps. Like it doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah, and I think this is where I love that debate of, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. No, we don't. And I think like myself and my husband are a very good example of this. So he gets up at 3:30 in the morning and he drives 2 hours to Truganina for work. And he does a lot of the time overtime, 10-hour days, 12-hour days, drives 2 hours home. He doesn't get home till sometimes 6:30 p.m. at night. And honestly, like he gets home, has dinner, and he's already ready for bed. You have to go to bed by like 8 o'clock if you want to get a decent night's sleep. When is he going to go to the gym during that time?
When does he go to the gym?
The weekends. Or an RDO, for example. Yeah. Whereas there's myself, I, can make my own schedule with my PT clients. I often leave a block late morning so I can train. I work from home so I can be flexible. Like saying that we have the same 24 hours in the day is laughable. We don't. And I think especially if you're starting out, you don't want to go from 0 to 100 because it's going to be so overwhelming. And often when, we obviously do an initial screening with new clients and we ask how many sessions are you doing at the moment? How many can you commit to? And if someone says they're not doing any sessions or they're doing maybe 1 to 2 sessions a week and they say they can commit to 5, I'll still give them a 3 or 4 day program. And then I'll say, look, let's start for 1 week on this or 2 weeks. If it's feeling cruisy and you're ready for a 5th session, let's add it on and we can build from there. But I don't want you to feel like, oh no, I only got 3 sessions in. We had 5 programmed. I'm not going to do this. This is too hard. That's what you want to avoid feeling.
100%. It's that feeling of failure that can then lead people to give up completely. And that's why it's really important that the plan needs to mold around your life. And almost from the client perspective, like if this is resonating with you, like when you do sign up with a coach, explain that and maybe underestimate your ability to begin with is a great idea in the sense that, saying, okay, realistically, I probably can only get 3 done. And then if you are getting that done, then you can say, hey, I reckon I can get 4 in. I think I can do this now that I found my groove, because you don't want to end up with this plan that is just so far outside your capacity.
Yeah, it's a lot better starting off feeling like you have that momentum, you're ticking all the boxes and you're feeling really good about yourself rather than already from week 1 feeling like a failure and that you've maybe made a mistake and that you can't do it anymore. And, it does require that balance. Like I know people say you've got to choose your hard, and I think that does come into it here of, sometimes it does require some sacrifice. You might need to get up a little bit earlier or, manage your time better and, choose your hard, but you don't want to choose your impossible. Like some things just aren't realistic for some people.
Yeah, I agree. And even when it comes to the nutrition side of things, if you are very time poor, then if you're making all of these really exotic recipes, you probably don't have time to do that either. You're probably best to just, chuck a kilo of mince in a pan, put some taco seasoning on it, get some frozen veggies and some rice and put it in the rice cooker, and there's your meals. It doesn't need to be elaborate. And that's something that I also see a lot where people are given really complex recipes and expected to spend all this time cooking when they're also trying to maybe feed an entire family is, and again, another really good example. And it's just not realistic. They need something that they can just kind of throw together rather than spend hours and hours cooking.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not going to make a recipe that has 20 ingredients, so I wouldn't expect my clients to either.
Yeah, either. My cooking is very basic because I feel that way and I don't have any children or anything, although I do have a very dependent dog.
Same.
It's not quite the same. All right. Next is emotional triggers and your inability to regulate.
Yep. I think a lot of people do tend to turn to food to feel grounded, and it's so easy to confuse emotional hunger and physical hunger. And if over time you've built that habit that in stressful situations or in, times where your emotions are really heightened, that you lean on food, I'm going to get a treat now, or I'm going to go get takeaway because that's going to make me feel comfortable. You're going to get addicted to that dopamine response that comes with that. And then that will become a bit of a habit. So it's about trying to differentiate, is this an emotional hunger right now? Has it come on suddenly? Are my emotions really heightened, or is it a physical hunger? Has it been developing over time? Is my stomach grumbling? When was the last time I ate? All of those sorts of cues.
Yeah, and I think if you do find that you emotionally eat or you turn to food for comfort, it's important to understand that the food is not the problem. The problem is actually your inability to regulate yourself and your lack of coping tools that you have. So it's not actually about changing the food or the nutrition plan in this case. It's more about actually giving you coping techniques and strategies. So what other things can we use to control and regulate your nervous system outside of food? Maybe it is doing some meditation and breath work. That is something that's probably best integrated before the fact rather than during. It's more effective that way. But can you do some breath work? Something I like to tell people is to do 4 rounds of box breathing anytime you're feeling that way. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but that's just 4 seconds in, 4 second hold at the top, 4 seconds out, 4 second hold at the bottom. it changes your state so fast. So if you can do that and then maybe break your state by getting out in nature, going for a walk, maybe it's calling a friend or calling your mom and having a bit of a rant about whatever it is that is making you feel emotionally dysregulated. Maybe it's doing some self-care, having a bath, doing a face mask. Like, what can you do to change your state? Actually, one that I really like, if I'm feeling anxious, I will put on a really upbeat song and I will just dance around my house.
You can't be sad in that situation.
Exactly.
You can't be.
Yeah. So if you are feeling like actually you just need grounding, you just need to change your emotional state and regulate your nervous system, food isn't actually going to do that anyway. So that's where it's like we need to work on the tools that you have in your toolkit to cope with those emotions and the whoa. We need to work on the tools that you have in your coping toolbox to regulate those emotions.
Yeah, and something that I found really helpful with one of my clients who's struggling with binge eating at the moment is that distraction and redirection. If you are like, the first step is obviously becoming aware that it's an issue and it's something that you struggle with, because some people don't even realize that they do it. So that's step one. But once you're aware that, okay, I'm really stressed or I'm highly emotional right now and all I want to do is eat a whole bag of Maltesers, in that situation going, okay, I'm just going to distract myself for 10 minutes. Like often that's all it'll take. As you said, maybe calling a friend, going for a drive, journaling for a little bit, getting outside the house for a quick walk. And sometimes that's all it takes to just get your mind elsewhere to prevent from reaching to the food. And then also trying to think about, if it's something that you do consistently, how do you feel afterwards? Noting that 9 times out of 10, if it's a full binge, for example, and not just, like a meal, if you're actually uncontrollably binging, you always feel worse afterwards. That no one ever gets to that stage and they're like, I feel so much better that I did that. Most of the time, you feel pretty rubbish. So trying to acknowledge, okay, is this actually going to be, positive for me to go down this path?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's so important to understand in this journey, if you do struggle with this, that it's never going to be perfectly linear. So if you have identified that you do emotionally regulate through food, then we want to start trying to switch that for a different coping tool. But if you do relapse, for lack of a better word, and turn to food, forgive yourself, because this is going to take time to reprogram. And obviously if you are binge eating and you're having pretty severe issues in this space, then getting support from a therapist or counselor is a great idea. We have some great networks that we can recommend you to if you do need support in that space. So always feel free to reach out to us. But yeah, this is something that starts on the inside and it's not actually solved through the food itself.
Definitely.
And then lastly, the lack of personalization in a plan. And I suppose an example of this is when you start with a coach and you are given a meal plan with all of the foods that you don't enjoy, for example, or you're a lifestyle client and you're put on a very bro bodybuilder meal plan, like it's chicken and broccoli all day long, which we wouldn't even give our bodybuilding clients that, but it happens. So if the plan that you're given is something that you actually just hate eating, it's going to be really hard for you to follow.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I'm writing meal plans, I love being creative with it. And obviously, as I said, with our initial assessment, we ask people, what foods do you enjoy? What are the things that you're currently eating? Because it's important to integrate it with your current habits and your current meals. And I am very much a creature of habit. I've had eggs every day probably for the last 4 years straight. I'm not even kidding. Maybe one day that I've missed. So if I then go into a meal plan that is completely new foods to me that I don't like cooking, maybe it's even things that I don't know how to cook, it's going to feel like a huge barrier, like straight off the bat.
Yeah, 100%. And even down to things like if you really love having a sweet treat after dinner, there is nothing wrong with that. But if your plan doesn't allow for that, well, of course, after dinner, you're going to sit there and be like, there's chocolate in the cupboard. I really want some of that. And ice cream would go down so good right now. So if the plan just accounts for that, it's going to be so much easier for you to follow it. I think another really good example of this as well is if you have a really sedentary job. So whether you work like a really long day in an office or you work from home and you really struggle to get your steps in, then it doesn't really make sense to try and overload your step target. Why don't we try and create an energy deficit in a different way? We could do cardio, which is much more time efficient, or we could just eat less. There's actually multiple ways to create an energy deficit. You don't have to hit high steps. So we really want to take into account the context of a person's life and what's realistic for them. And even in the case of prepping someone for a competition, if I'm increasing their output, I will generally say, do you have a preference for more cardio or steps at this point? Like, how are you going with fitting all of this in around everything you do? Because even in the case of comp prep, oftentimes either of those levers are perfectly fine and equally as effective.
Yeah. And I think as well, especially more for lifestyle clients, there's this myth that, you have to be doing 10K steps in order to see fat loss results. So the magic 10K, that's kind of just a number that's come out of nowhere. It doesn't need to be 10,000. I have plenty of lifestyle clients that have fat loss goals that are doing 6,000, 7,000 steps a day, and they're seeing great results because at the end of the day, if you're previously doing 2,000, 3,000, which a lot of people who are sedentary are at about that target, that's still a massive increase from where you're at. And if you're also then leveraging, a deficit throughout their food and maybe they're adding in like a 15-minute cardio session, that's still plenty for that person to still see results. You don't have to hit 10,000. And especially, as you said, if it's not realistic for you and you're having to get up an hour earlier before an already early alarm, or you're missing out on time with your family at the end of the day because you're doing laps around the kitchen to hit your steps, it's not going to be an enjoyable process for you.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously non-exercise activity, movement like walking and steps, it is important. There is a time and a place where I think sometimes we do need a bit of a kick up the bum, like we need to just get more steps in. If you're only getting 3,000 steps a day, probably just need to figure out how we can get a few more. But at the same time, how can we also make that work easier? Is it getting a walking pad so that you can actually work from a standing desk? I have one at home because even though, as online coaches, you probably think, oh, you got all the time in the world to get your activity in. Honestly, like
check-in days, no.
I actually was thinking the other day, I left corporate because I didn't want an office job. And now I have an office job. I love it though. I'm really passionate about it.
Now it's 12 hours instead of 8.
Literally. But it's fine because obviously I absolutely love what I do and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I even notice when I'm sitting down for long periods of time, I get so agitated. Like I need to move, not in an angry way, just in a I just antsy my pants.
Yeah,
antsy's
I'm the
a better
same.
word.
I have it's like my ritual is once I close my laptop, I'll go on a walk at the end of the day. It's like my decompression end of the day, and then also because I feel like my hips are seizing by that point and I need to get up and stretch.
My hips are seizing now.
Yeah, I know. I literally sound like being on this ankle. So yes, I completely agree. Another thing that's really important is the week-to-week assessment, which obviously we do with our check-ins every single week. I think it can be a common mistake to sign up to a general, 6-week program. They have their time and place, 100%. But it's like the same calorie targets and the same program for everyone, even ones at gyms, for example. And I'm like, what you need is going to be completely different to what someone who's, a foot taller than you needs, or someone who has a better metabolism, or, if you're trying to do the same diet that your husband's on and you're frustrated that he's getting results and you're not, you need something that is not only customized to your physiology, but is assessed on a week-to-week basis so that if you aren't responding, or maybe the other end, you're responding really quickly and maybe it's too aggressive, we can ease back, we can make those changes.
Yeah, I think too with doing that weekly touch point, it does allow you to voice if something isn't working for you, like if the gym sessions are too frequent or too long, or if you are really struggling to hit your steps, so that the plan can be changed. When we follow something that is generic, there's no real understanding on how we can make it more flexible, how we can make it fit into our lives. And that's where I guess the beauty of something that is more personalized and has that touch point is really helpful.
Yeah, and how many times have you heard, I've tried everything and nothing works for me, but a lot of the time that everything they've tried is, things that maybe are more generic or just things that aren't well suited to them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like the generic plans, I'm just thinking of like the Bikini Body Guide that was really popular when I first got into fitness by Kayla Itsinus. I hope I said her name right. But like a generic plan like that, you see all these incredible results from it because, yeah, it will work for a small percentage of people that's the exact perfect program for them basically in terms of output, input, etc. It does become like a great formula for them, but that's just a small percentage. Whereas something customized means that, you know, it's going to get adjusted and molded until it is working for you. And that's the beauty of it. It's like it can get anyone results really because you've got that ability to flex and change and make sure that it works for you.
Yeah, and I think that's also leads into a lot of people using MyFitnessPal without guidance. I know there was a phase where MyFitnessPal got like a lot of hate because, you know, people would put in their gender and their height and then it would come up with a target for them. And I agree, don't follow that target without guidance if you don't have the, I guess, education behind you to know. And I think I'm a prime example for that. I think when I put in my maintenance, it was like 2100. That's a pretty significant deficit for me, like for where I'm at now. And that was supposed to be like my maintenance or a slow build, for example. So making sure that everything you're doing is with guidance as well.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get better outcomes out of that. And yeah, that's so funny about MyFitnessPal. It's telling you to eat 2100 because I know how much you can eat. Yeah, awesome. Well, I think that really covers everything in terms of why it might actually be the plan that is the problem. And maybe you just need something that allows you to work smarter, not harder, so that you can get better results and not feel the guilt anytime you feel like you're struggling to stick to the plan. Thank you all for being here and for joining us today. We would absolutely love, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, we'd love if you could subscribe. That's a really great way to support us in building this podcast. And if you have any topics that you would love us to chat about, please leave us a comment and let us know.